Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling, but there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that, I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Hero Show again. I have the pleasure of being online with Phyllis Ginsberg. Phyllis, are you there?
I am here.
Awesome. Glad to have you here, Phyllis. Let me do a quick introduction for people who may or may not have heard of you before. So you are the author of Brain Makeover, which is a weekly guide to happier, healthier, and a more abundant life, which sounds like a good book to start off with. And you're known by many, known and loved by many as the people who are happier, less stressed working professionals as their survival to thrival expert. So we'll have to talk a little bit about what that means on the course of the show here. So first thing we always start off with is basically what it is that you're known for now. What is it that people come to you, Phyllis, for, and what do you help them with?
Well, that's a great question. And currently, people come to me when they want to make positive, lasting changes. If they've had a situation, whether it's in their personal life or professional life, that's getting in the way of either. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people that are having health issues recently, and that's no surprise. We've got an abundance of food and drinks and sugar and you name it, and so many people suffering with health issues, diabetes and cancer. And so I'm seeing a lot of people in my practice and when I'm out speaking that are dealing with some really serious health issues. And that gets in the way of not only their professional life, but also their relationships. What I do is I help to get them on track to be congruent, so they don't have like this inner struggle. And if you can see my hands like this, most people have this inner struggle. I want to feel better, but I don't know how to get there, or I know how to get there, but I can't do it. I can't figure out how to even get close to what I need to do to be healthier, or once I get there, I can't sustain it. My doctor says I need to do this, this, and this, and I just can't do it.
So people are coming to you for, health or mental issues or things like that to help sort of get their life where they want it to be?
Right. And then there are quite a few entrepreneurs and professionals that I work with that they have a lot of stress and anxiety and overwhelm in their work because they've got too much to do, not enough support, not enough hours in the day. And when you're stressed out, it does a lot of things to your body. And it puts you in fight or flight, especially the chronic stress. And here's what happens to your brain. This wonderful brain that we have that's supposed to help us to think and solve problems and do what we need to do to function. Well, if you're in fight or flight because you just got an email from somebody who has a deadline and you're like, what am I going to do? I'm so stressed I can't even think straight. That's because the blood in your body goes to your hands and feet, legs and arms so that you can fight or flee, which means you're not thinking clearly. You don't have access to your memory as well. Forget intuition and guidance. Like, you don't need any of that if you have to run from danger. And all the danger signals get they go on alarm that you're in danger, and it was an email. And that's how a lot of people are functioning out in the world today.
And so you come in and you help them learn how to retrain how they're responding to those kind of things so that they can respond, I guess, intelligently, or respond without the stress and things like that, and actually like sort of take control.
What I do is I work with them on their thoughts so that their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions can be more congruent.
Awesome. So you mentioned before we got on the call that you do therapy. So I'm curious, does this all sort of line in with the whole entrepreneurial stuff? You do coaching, you do consulting, you do therapy. Is your practice part of your business? Like, how does that sort of fit together?
Right. I actually, my undergraduate degree is in business and marketing. And so I have this great business mind. I went to therapy school for myself because I wanted to do things differently, and I thought that would solve all my issues from childhood.
Yeah.
And so I never really intended to become a therapist, you know, like the whole feeling thing. And you know, we're going to spend years figuring this stuff out. No, I've never been a typical therapist. Most of my work has been short term, and a lot of it has been assessment and recommendations, especially the work I've done with domestic violence victims and high conflict divorce. I worked for many years separately doing both of those as an area of expertise. And when you look for specific things of thought processes, what I've discovered is that if you're in survival thinking, and everybody I've worked with in my 30 years, especially those who have had trauma, they are in survival thinking. And survival thinking is very different than possibility thinking. Survival thinking is, I have a problem, I have to figure out how I'm going to deal with this so I can survive. When you're in that, you're problem focused, and I help people get to be solution focused, and it's a shift.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a big shift, right? Because like one of the things I talk to my children all the time about is the, you know, it's very common when they're young to look at a situation and say, I can't. And I always tell them that shuts their brain down, right? Anytime you say I can't, you've shut off your brain. So instead ask yourself, how can I? Which opens your brain up to thinking. And it sounds like you like teach that kind of thinking like professionally to entrepreneurs and to, you know, in your therapy work.
Right. I do that. And I also use techniques that calm the fight or flight response and rewire the brain.
Awesome. Okay. So what I want to find out then is sort of how this all happened, right? You know, we talk all the time on the show about, you know, every hero has an origin story, right? And this is where you sort of started to realize that you were different, that maybe you had superpowers and maybe you could use them to help people. How did that come to be for you?
Well, I would say my whole story started at birth, but I won't go all the way back there.
I saw the light, and then
the real defining point was 2005. I was in near burnout in every area of my life. I had been working with in private practice as a therapist with an expertise in high conflict divorce. So everybody that came to me was court ordered through the courts for either a child custody evaluation, mediation, co-parenting, whatever they needed, they would just send my way.
The rough stuff.
Actually, it was fun stuff for me, and it was tame compared to dealing with child abuse, domestic violence, and rape cases. I'll take high conflict divorce any day over that. That's like candy. I loved it. I was great at it, but I worked 12 to 14 hours a day, almost 7 days a week. I became so popular, I had an 8-month waiting list. And I couldn't be superwoman, is what I discovered. I still had 2 kids at home, a dog, a cat, and a husband. And I tried to do it all, and I couldn't. So I took some time off once I got caught up and sent the court cases back that I had for as a special master to keep them out of court. They had to come see me before they filed any more motions. And through that time off, I went through some self-discovery. I immersed myself in positive psychology, which was relatively new, at least getting more popular. And I went back to using tapping, EFT tapping, the emotional freedom technique. I don't know if you and your listeners.
I have never heard of that.
You
have to describe it for us.
Okay, well, I definitely have to tell you what that's about. Do you want to hear that now?
Yeah. I would love to hear about it. We can skip back to your story. You got into tapping, and we'll come back to that in just a second.
Yes. So I was so fortunate to meet Dr. Roger Callahan before I even got licensed as a therapist. He was the one that pioneered this tapping modality. It's a technique that you tap like here by the eyebrow, side of the eye. These are meridian points used in Chinese medicine. And so he actually came up with a system that was quite complex. And what he discovered by doing tapping, he was working with this woman who had a severe phobia to water. She couldn't even wash her hands or take a shower. So he asked her, where in your body do you feel the anxiety of that? And she said her stomach. So he said, well, tap right here, just like this, and we're going to talk about it. So they did. And 5 minutes later, she said, I don't have that feeling in my stomach anymore. She went and put her hand in his pool of water. And he made this connection that if you release the stored emotions through tapping and talking, that you can free traumas, anxiety, all of the fears and phobias that so many people carry. And he gave me his materials before I went for my orals. When I got licensed in California, you had to do a written exam and an oral exam. And I used the tapping to calm myself down for the orals because that was more anxiety provoking than childbirth. And it worked.
Yeah.
And so I went back to using those tools. In that gap of time, someone else simplified his tapping so that it could be more available to the masses. Prior, it was only for mental health professionals.
Yeah.
And so he made it, Gary Craig made it available as a modality that has become almost mainstream. There's like millions of people using it, but obviously in a lot of circles, still there are so many more people that aren't aware of it yet.
Yeah.
I use that. It calms the amygdala in the brain, so it's calming the nervous system and that fight or flight response. It rewires the brain. You can have memories of something traumatic and you won't have the emotional reaction to it anymore.
Interesting. So how did that tie into getting you to where you are now?
So I used all of these pieces to deal with, I really yearned to be home with my kids before they went off to college. I still had some unresolved grief from my mom dying at a young age when I was only 15. And there were just a whole lot of things that I felt like I was missing out on doing all this work for the court, playing with other kids when I wanted to be home playing with my kids.
Yeah.
And I knew I could never go back to that life. I could never be the same person that I was then. And so through doing that, going back to my meditation practice, I got in touch with my intuition and guidance. And before I knew it, I started writing, journaling. A friend of mine said, oh, you should write a blog. I said, I have no idea how to do that. So she got me set up. Like, I had no intention to be a writer. And then I through this writing, I put together what was my Monday topics were healthy mind. And that became my book, Brain Makeover.
Interesting. And so has the book led into more client work, or have you developed courses? Like what's the business sort of turned into nowadays?
Well, now I just released my second book called Tired and Hungry No More, Not Your Ordinary Guide to
Yeah.
Reclaiming Your Health and Happiness. And in the last, let's say, 4.5 years since I became an author, I have been out speaking, doing workshops. I like doing teleworkshops because people can then
Yeah.
be like this. They could be on the phone. I don't do like the visual because I don't like people having to feel like they've got to be on
Yeah.
and participate. But it's purely interactive participation. It's lots of fun. I also locally do I started a tapping community where people come to my.
Nice. So you sort of pulled this full circle into sort of like designing the lifestyle you want. So tell us, do you get to play with your kids more now?
My kids are grown and I just became a grandmother. I have
Nice. So you get time to play with your grandkids then.
yes, I have a almost 4-month-old granddaughter.
Nice. Yeah, I have a almost 3-month-old baby girl who her grandma is in love with. So
Nice. Well,
yeah.
2005 was what? That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was like 13 years ago. So
I made that transition, and then I fully changed my practice and what I do. And I don't see as many individual clients. I like to do things in groups. There's so many benefits to working as a group because people who you may not even know what's inside of you, what's going on. I call it our programming. We get this programming by the time we're 7 years old. Most of our programming is there, including our coping skills. And a lot of those coping skills don't work in the adult world. That at some point we need to shift them. And so I use my laser assessment skills and can really zone in quickly and get people so they can be more congruent with what they want instead of having those old programs running the show and getting in the way.
It's interesting you say group coaching is super effective, because one of the things I've discovered with a lot of my clients when we teach them how to build their masterminds and their coaching programs and their workshops and whatnot, a lot of them, they're transitioning, they're either doing one-on-one work and are resistant to the group coaching work for whatever reason. And we've actually found time and time again that their clients get better results in group coaching than they do in one-on-one coaching. And my theory on this, and this is just a theory, so you probably have more expertise than I do on this, my theory is that when you put a group of people together with the coach or with the mentor who's teaching, it's immediately apparent to them that if they want to change, that the onus is on them to do that. When it's in one-on-one situations, a lot of times they put that on the person who's doing the teaching. So anyways, that's my theory on why people get better results out of group coaching than one-on-one a lot of times.
I thought of that. I mean, you might be onto something there. I think there's tremendous benefit to people getting together and collaboratively. There's so much that can happen synergistically in a group than you could ever get with one-on-one.
Yeah, and you learn from each other, and questions that you never thought to ask but are relevant to you, and that kind of stuff. Yes. And it's, we're designed to be community people, right, and story people, and that just works better in a group. So, anyways, that's really cool. So, next part of this is your superpowers, right? So, what is it that you do or build that really helps your clients solve their problems? If you can narrow it down to one thing and say, hey, this is Phyllis's superpower, what would you say it is?
I have to say my access to guidance and intuition.
So what do you mean by that?
That means that I can get out of the way. Like nothing when I'm working with somebody has to do with me. I'm totally focused in the moment. I know I've got this tremendous foundation of assessment skills and the ability with 30 years of experience working with clients. And just to be with them and allow for what's going to come through. And lo and behold, it's always, I'm so in tune that I can say the right thing. I'll say something and they're like, that's exactly what I was thinking. Are you in my head? Like, it's almost, it's almost kind
It's
of
almost like a superpower.
It is I totally would describe it as a superpower. And when I was working so much and prior to 2005 and burnout, I knew that like you hear mother's intuition, and I could have this intuition. So I think I already had it developed, but after burnout and I went through my transformation, it is so heightened that between that and my laser sharp assessment skills, I mean, I can get to something like that
real quick. So tell me this. How much of that superpower do you think is something that was developed versus a natural born talent?
I don't know if it's developed. Well, there's probably an element of develop, but there's also what I think is I had to clear enough stuff out of the way in order to be present to it. I think that's probably the most accurate, because until I dealt with my emotional world more, I didn't have space and decrease stress. I didn't have space to take it in.
So what I think is really interesting about that is you mentioned earlier that what you do is you help people clear away the cobwebs in their lives, right? The things that are causing them so they can get to what they do well. And you realize like your superpower was hidden under, whatever you'd want to call it, things that were holding you back. So, I mean, obviously you do have some of the development of your skills over the years of doing what you do, but the superpower was there. Right. And just like any of your clients, anything people that we work with, it's like they've got something to share. And sometimes you just have to get the mental stuff out of the way so you can see it, so it can come and shine through and help other people.
Exactly. I think that you've described it very well. That is exactly what all of us probably are encumbered with, too much overlay. And that once we clear that, we have access to all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, you realize that that you've got all sorts of cool powers in there that you didn't know about.
Exactly.
So that's and it's intense, and I love that about life. That like as you, I don't know, I grew up in the age of video games, right? And it feels like you can level up your life as you increase your skill sets and increase your ability to sort of like understand and control your mind and all the power that's there. Just as you get further into life, you get more access to the power that you've had the whole time.
Yeah, I think that we are born with these, maybe they're hidden levels of things, and until we're ready for them, they won't show up. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So, and it fits nicely into the whole, the superpower, theme that we're talking about, because it really feels like that sometimes when you get, especially when you get to a point where you've mastered something and it just flows easily. It can seem, especially to others who are looking in, like you have a superpower, because they look at it and go, how do you make that look so easy? Right. Yeah. And I've always sort of held the thought that if you look at something in your life and say, or if you ever catch yourself talking to your clients and say, you just do this thing, it's really easy. That's when, anytime that you label something as really easy is a hint that maybe you have a superpower there. Because most other people don't look at that same situation or that same thing and think, that's really easy to do or say or, be a part of.
Right. And then I've worked with clients who say, people aren't going to pay me for this. This is so easy. I could do this in a snap. I do it in my sleep. I do it for free. And I'm like, that's your superpower.
You're like, that's it right there. That's the hint, right? Is if you think it's easy, that's the stuff that's valuable to other people.
Exactly. So. I said, do you know how many people don't know how to do that?
Yeah, most of them, in fact.
And they think that everybody can, but that's not true.
Yeah. So the other side of your superpowers are your fatal flaws, right? So we talk, Superman has his kryptonite, Batman's not actually a superhero, right? He's just real smart and dedicated. If you could narrow down a fatal flaw, something that has held back your business in the past or even currently, what would you say it is? And more importantly, what have you been doing to rectify that so you can move your business forward? So if other people suffer from those kind of things, they might be able to make changes.
Oh, that was a challenge to just figure out because the way that I was brought up, and I led a very isolated life with a lot of responsibility at a very young age.
Yeah.
And
especially if your mother died when you were 15.
Yeah, and she was sick my whole life. So being overly responsible, I think, is one of the fatal flaws, and growing up in isolation. So I've got like two things that really go against.
So overly responsible is one I've never heard on the show before. Talk a little about like how that manifests.
Okay, so if you're overly responsible as a child, that means that you don't get the freedom to be a child, to play, to, there's a burden that comes with that. Like you're kind of saddled with too many responsibilities and having to grow up too fast in the adult world. So not being able to connect with people and play and have spontaneity and enjoy things, have fun. Like I'm still working on how to do all that stuff.
Well, how did that impact your business sort of negatively?
Because those things don't come naturally to me. I think it's harder for me to connect with people when I'm not working with them. I've worked really hard to be able to connect and not feel like I have to take care of someone, because that was my template. That's my programming. And then to not isolate. And it is isolating being an entrepreneur or working in an office as a therapist where everything was about my clients and nothing was about me. So like not having a me in my life for the majority of it, as all my energy went out to everyone else. I mean, that I paid a huge price for that.
So how have you sort of turned that around, and what kind of things have you done to make a change that's really that you've seen have had a visual, an impact on what you do now?
I would say that by going through the transformation I did and introducing positive psychology and understanding brain research and how all the pieces fit together to deal with emotions, that I was able to free up the heaviness that was really weighing me down. And through that, my work is play now. Like I have such a fun time. There's nothing more rewarding than shifting someone's thoughts so that they could be free and pursue what lights them up, and they could have a purpose and meaning, and it doesn't matter what it is, but for them to say, wow, I got clarity on what my next steps are.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote that was just said the other day by Tim Cook. Let me see if I can find it on here. He said if there's a common quote that if you love the work you do, that you'll never work a day in your life, right? Tim Cook, who's the head of Apple, actually said if you love your work, then you'll work harder than you ever thought possible, but the tools will feel light in your hands.
Yeah, I like that. That is exactly. And when I do what I do, like all the marketing and promotion and all that, that's not as fun. Although this is fun because I get to connect with you, and hopefully the audience is having as much fun as I am.
Yeah, and
it's doing the work to me is
it's fun, right? It's interesting. So it's like when you fall in love with what you do, like that quote said, right? It's you'll work hard, right? You'll work hard, you'll work long, but the tools feel light in your hands. It's not a burden, it's a joy,
Yes.
right?
And I think
And
that's what I
yeah,
was able to shift. Like, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I have to do it. Because I could be good at a lot of things, and that's not what I aim to do. And when I went through burnout, I decided, okay, what is it that I want to do? And I was able
yeah,
to make this shift to decide, okay, I'm going to value me. This is my life. And if I don't do something for me, when am I ever going to do it? And why be here if I'm not going to?
so the next obvious question in relation to that is, how much did that impact the quality of the work that you actually deliver when you're working with people? Like when you're speaking on stages or doing your group workshops, do you think that you were able to connect better and help people more fully because of how you've changed?
I think that I definitely bring a different me to my work than I did in the past. I was great at what I did, but there wasn't really a me with a personality in the past. Before, it was like dress professional, look like, the court's expert, and all that, and have the facade. Like, I could be having the worst day, but nobody knew it. I'd go to court, like the judges and attorneys, they would all say, oh, how wonderful, and you ready for another case? You just finished this one, and like, okay, yes, I'll take it. Like, I'll put them on my list. And nobody had a clue just how bad that I was starting to become in distress from taking on too much. So yeah, I bring a lightness now to my work that wasn't there. I think that because I chose to work with people to make changes, where the court people, I was mostly helping them solve problems, negotiation, doing mediation, making recommendations to the court. Those had different outcomes. And now I wouldn't even call that what I do as therapy, because it is like so laser fast. When I work with somebody in a group or on a workshop call, in 10 or 15 minutes, I can shift something that might be a 10 for them. They're so stressed out. It's a scale of 1 to 10. It's the highest that it could be. And I can bring it down to a 2 or a 3 in like 10 or 15 minutes. So
That's cool.
yeah, it's really quick transformation.
Yeah. And people will definitely pay for quick transformation. So that's got to be a cool thing for bottom line on the business side. What I talk a little bit about is your common enemy, right? So the common enemy is the thing that you fight against, right? So if you could, every client that comes to you, group workshop, or, if they're listening to you on stage or whatever, if you could just wave a magic wand and remove something from their life, and allow them to get the transformation that you do, would you be able to name that and say what it is?
Well, I want to remove the heaviness. And I think the reason I choose, is that the right word? Well, that's the first word that came to my mind, is heaviness, because we all are stopped in our tracks by something that's in our way. And I think for a lot of people that I work with, there's a heaviness. They're carrying something, like what's weighing you down. And it could be a financial burden, a health burden. Maybe you've got a challenging child that you have to help through life. I think that we all have something that weighs us down and keeps us.
Yeah, sometimes it could just be the simple responsibilities of life, right? Like,
Yeah.
in my case, I've got a wife and 4 children, and regardless of how much I love them, the responsibility of like, I have to be prepared to take care of them and those kind of things, like that's never going to change.
Right.
But it's just a thing that because you're a dad and a husband, you got responsibilities.
But I think you're unique in that you have gone the extra steps to find what you enjoy, where a lot of people, I think, find themselves stuck in, I have to do this because I have to support my family, even though I don't like it.
Yeah.
I do believe
That's true.
a lot of people and want to be entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, business owners that say, oh, I wish that I could quit my job and just do this full time.
Yeah.
Maybe trying to juggle both a full-time job or a part-time job and get
so you help them like, if you could get in and take off that burden that's saying I wish I could, but I can't.
Yeah.
And so that they can move forward and actually do some of those things. That's the thing that you would help them. You would remove that, whatever is holding them into that I wish I could but I can't mentality. Right,
to free them from the survival mode thinking into possibility.
Yeah. It's interesting how often because I don't know if I mentioned this before we got on the call. I travel full time with my family, so we're on the road traveling. We're in an RV and we travel full time. We've been going for 2 years now, and one of the things that I hear regularly as we meet and talk with people is they're like, "Oh, that's really cool. I wish I could do that," and I always respond with like, "Why don't you?" And they always respond with, "Oh, I can't because fill in whatever the reason why they feel like they can't," and sometimes the reality is they don't actually want to do the thing that I'm doing. So that they're just looking at an idealized life,
yes,
and saying they want to do that. But a lot of times they might actually want to do something very similar. And maybe it's a job or it's a kid or home, their kids are in school or whatever it is. They have all these reasons why they can't. And I don't know how to help people through that. Like, how do you, because for me, it's always been like, if I want to, I'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Right. Which is a rare breed.
Yeah.
I seriously think there's a small percentage of people that naturally will do that kind of shifting on their own. And then there's the rest of us that kind of like the universe has to bring us to a place where we're forced.
Yeah, you have to someone push you past the I can't.
Yeah.
Right.
So that we can get out of our comfort zone, or as I say, we're comfortably uncomfortable and we're not willing to go beyond that.
Yeah. So you'd help push people past that. So I think it's really interesting because I actually think it ties into the next question, right? Which is your driving force, right? So driving force is the other side of that enemy. It's the thing that you fight for, right? So Spider-Man fights to save New York, and Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to categorize all of the world's information. What is it you say you fight for in your business, in your life now?
Oh my goodness. I would have to say for people to have possibilities.
Possibilities. That's good.
And not feel stuck.
Yeah, and what I really like about that is it's an open-ended type of thinking.
Yes.
Right. Where it's not a it's not that you're helping people achieve a specific goal or get to a specific weight or anything like that. It's like you have the possibilities in your life, the choices, right? It's freedom, right? You're teaching people to fight for freedom.
Right. It's not only freedom, it's also for them to find what is the best thing for them that they're aligned with, so that they can do what they're here to do. They can live the kind of life and have the experiences that are unique to them, because I'm not one that's going to say, I know what's right for you, or I know what's good for you, or if we just do this, you're going to have this wonderful life. I don't need to go into that whole, I'm going to tell you what to do. No, we're going to have things naturally evolve out of you, because if each of us have our own gifts and talents, I want those to emerge, and I want people to discover what they are. I can't be telling them, this is what you have to do, or this is all you need to do. I don't have the answer to say, if you follow this diet or if you follow this marketing plan.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that I think about regularly, it says that when you're making decisions for what you're going to do, like during the day, like your actual tasks that you're going to do every day, is do only what only you can do. Right. So, thinking of like possibilities, it's like, I think I'll go back to the thought that people are stuck in that I can't mode, is a lot of times people are doing things that many people could do, right? Or anyone could do. It's not something that's uniquely them, right? And when you sort of help them discover their unique gifts and their powers, and they start doing things that only they could do, that's when they're sort of freed up and have the possibilities of open up for them.
Right. And if people don't have the opportunity to access what their gifts and talents are and what's unique to them, then they are going to they're going to miss out on that ability to have the kind of life that I think what a lot of people pick up on is, I want to feel as free as you come across.
Yeah.
Because there's an energy that comes with this flow of life that's not burdened with too much stress and responsibility and overwhelm. Yeah,
and like it's something that I had to fight to get to in my life, right? Fight to get to that place. But I'm actually in the middle. I started writing some stuff down on for my own book on this process of how you get to that point. And what I find interesting is that that freedom, right, where we had that energy and whatnot. A lot of what I think it's coming down to, and I'm still like working through thinking this through, is realizing that I don't know quite how to say this yet, but it's that you have a destination in mind,
mm-hmm.
but your daily choices on how you get there are pretty open, right? You have control over your time, you have control over your financial decisions, you have control over your location, and you have and you're content with like what you're doing now. Yes. But you're going somewhere, right? Like that you have a destination, right? And that allows you to enjoy the journey you're on. And I don't know, there's something about like enjoying what you're doing now and the journey that you're taking, and being able to, even when things don't go well, realize that they're part of the journey. And I don't know, that's I think where a lot of that lightness energy comes from, is just realizing that it's not about the destination you're going to get to eventually. I mean, you should have someplace you're moving towards, but it's about what you're doing and experiencing now.
Right. And I think that there's a few pieces that go with that. One is that you're accepting what is now, you're dealing with what is, and whether it goes well or not, it's part of the process. You also are leaving room open for chance meetings. I didn't know 6 months ago that I would be having this podcast interview with you, right? Yeah. So I had to leave something open to say, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing step by step, and who's going to help me get there. Well, you don't always know who's going to help you get where you're going, or mm-hmm. what. Maybe there's a detour, like the universe says, oh, we're going to have your motorhome gets a flat tire and you're delayed.
Yeah.
And you have to spend the night.
It's delayed.
Right?
One of the things that's really interesting about this lifestyle in particular is how it condenses a lot of those experiences that people have, where they realize those like rules about life, mm-hmm. is that you have to leave open and stuff like that. Is it's like, I might, like everything changes, right? So like this week I'm in one place, next week I'm in another place, the week after we'll blow an engine, right? And you have to figure out how to solve those things. And it's, I don't know, it's just part of that whole process. It's like, before in my life, before we started traveling, I've learned a lot of those same things over a larger period of time.
Mm.
But it's like traveling has condensed a lot of that learning, and sort of figuring that, like, exactly what you just set out.
And I think there's such a thing as divine timing, that this isn't all as we wish. There's a whole, however things are orchestrated, that if it's not meant to happen today, it's not going to happen today. And if next week's a better time for it, I just surrender and like, okay, my intuition says next week, and this week looks good to me, but I'm going to go with next week, because I don't argue with intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely something to be said for the intuition, gut feelings, that kind of stuff, where you realize, like, maybe this just doesn't feel right. And making the decisions and moving forward on those things. And like, actually, like we were talking about earlier, you sort of have to clear out some of the other stuff so you can hear that.
Right.
All right. So you can hear those, hear the intuition. Otherwise it's not something that you'll hear.
And I think when people are desperate to make something happen, they're pushing against something instead of allowing it to flow and organically see, okay, what's my next best step? That's a question I will sometimes ask myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here, I got all these papers and different things. Okay, what's my next best step, or what would be of most benefit to look at now? And if you don't take the time to do something like that, and you just go race from one thing to another, where are you in it? You're like a machine instead of actually connecting with what you're doing.
Yeah. And then you realize that, like, that creativity, that divine spark comes in when you sit down and you ask yourself those questions, right? When you ask yourself better questions, like, what can I do here? Like, what the next step is, what's the, like, I like the way you said that, right? Because a lot of people ask themselves, what do I do next? And what you were saying is, what's the best next step, right? Which is a better question. And when you ask yourself better questions, you allow room for better answers.
Exactly. And one of the things that I will often say is that I'll take someone from having thoughts of stress and worry and get them to a place where they can be calm, get clarity, and be creative.
Yeah. So that actually brings me to the next thing, which is talking a little bit about your tools, right? We talk the hero's tool belt, so to speak, right? Thor had his big magical hammer. Our neighborhood police officers have their bulletproof vest. Maybe you just use Keynote or Evernote. I had a guy on the podcast a few weeks ago who his magical tool was a big A3 sheet of paper that he uses to draw things out on. Do you have any specific tools you use either for yourself or for your clients that really help you accomplish what you do?
For myself, every day I will take a sheet of paper. Sometimes I'll do it the night before, if not the morning of, and I will write down, I'll take it from my calendar and I'll write everything that needs to get done, when it needs to get done, if I have to drive to my office, what time I'm going to leave. I have everything where I need to be so I can see gaps of time and I can make sure nothing falls through the cracks. But more important, I'm on target. I know what I'm going to make happen or where I'm going, so that I'm not just, I don't have anything going on until 3 o'clock, or I have a group tonight, so I've got most of the day, and sit around waiting or checking emails, or you can get caught up for hours doing things, figuring important.
Doing reactionary stuff instead of doing stuff that you're actually driving yourself.
Right. I also add my exercise in there, and just have a sense of what I'm doing. And then I'm open to, if something changes, like this morning, I realized I better call the home warranty people because I have a toilet that the tank is leaking. It's dripping water on the floor. And I'm like, okay, that's going to change my plans for tomorrow. Summer comes.
Move some stuff on the calendar. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I think we're on like episode 19 or 20 right now here with the Heroes Show, and out of those many episodes, probably a good 25% of the entrepreneurs that we've talked to have have mentioned that their most important tool is some form of their calendar for the day. And how vital that is. So it's just interesting that, that it keeps popping up, and that, you're saying the same type of things. It's like, when you look at your day, it's like, I've got to plan my day out and know what it is that I'm doing. And one of the things we were just talking about on like the last episode we did was, people will, from the outside looking in, they'll look at that and be like, that's rigid, right? And it's not flexible, and realize that it's freeing, right? It's the opposite of what people think it is, that when you actually know what you're going to be doing next, you've removed that mental space where you're trying to think about, what I have to do next. And you've removed that mental space where you're reacting to things, and you just know, hey, this is getting taken care of. This is what's going on. And it allows you to be more present in every space, right? So even when you've got the time for your family later, you're not thinking about all the things that you could have or should have been doing, because you've got it all taken care of. It's all down on the paper or on the calendar or whatever your version of that is.
It is so good for your brain to put something on paper and not just focus on here, or even have it in your phone. I mean, there's a lot of people that have just switched to the phone, and if that works for you, great. But I love having it on paper, being able to look at it, make little notes, cross things off when I'm done. It's like a roadmap. You might get in your trailer and just drive because that's what you do, but I bet you have a map where you're going to the next place. And if you wake up every day and you don't have a map of what you're going to do, then by default, we are creatures of habit, and we're going to do the same thing every day unless we plan it different. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because like, if we used my travel as an analogy, one of the things that I've noticed is we can't, for daily things, you can't plan too far in the future, right? Because there's too many things that happen that change the trajectory, right? That it's like we have long term, we have like a goal in mind, right? Like this summer we're planning on going up the coast, but like as far as detailed plans, we've only got the next few weeks planned out detailed, because beyond that it's almost impossible to do. And I've noticed the same thing is true in business, right? You might have your plan for today needs to be a lot more detailed than your plan for this month, which needs to be a lot more detailed than your plan for this quarter, right? And it's like, hey, what we're doing, what I plan on doing this year is, right, I want to hit a certain income level. And the questions you ask yourself on a daily basis are like, are these things that I'm doing today, all the little things that I put on my calendar, are they driving towards that goal or away from the big goal? But that big goal is like, it's not a big detailed, like, here's all the things I'm going to do every day for the next 365 days to make that happen. It's like on a daily basis, you're thinking through the little things that drive to the larger goal.
One of my mentors says, you write your long-term goals or your goals in pen, and you write your action steps in pencil.
Yeah, so you can erase them, right? Or I've heard that you write your long ones in stone, and you write your other ones in the sand.
Yes.
So, because half the time, the ocean waves are going to come up and wash them out, and you got to try again.
Right, and I have come to learn that if I don't overbook and overthink things and think I know and force things to happen or make them happen my way, if I take a step back, oftentimes they will happen in ways so much better and more effective, more rewarding than I could have ever thought myself.
Absolutely.
Are you tired of trying to write webinars that don't consistently convert? How would you like to have a webinar that effortlessly created sales in your online business? You can. Introducing the Webinar Alchemy Workshop. Webinar Alchemy Workshop is an online masterclass that will help you write incredibly persuasive webinars for your online courses quickly and easily. Using what you learn in this class, you can build a webinar that educates your entire audience while still creating sales. For a limited time, you can purchase this masterclass for only $7, and you'll get the exact framework I've personally used to help my clients sell more than $1 million worth of online coaching and training just over the last year. Simply text the word alchemy, ALCHEMY, to to 444-999 and I'll send you all the details.
The music is by Purple Planet Music. Visit www.purple-planet.com.
Transition a little bit here. Talk about your own personal heroes, right? So in our theme here, Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad. Who were some of your heroes? Were they real life mentors? Were they authors, peers who may be a couple of years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you've accomplished so far in your life and your business?
I'd have to say that the author that I followed probably, I don't know, from the time I was like 19, was Wayne Dyer. Are you familiar with Wayne Dyer?
I'm not. What is he known for?
Okay, so he was considered like the father of, let's see if I get this right, like of personal growth. And
Okay.
back in, I think it must have been like 1975, 76, he came out with a book called Your Erroneous Zones. And I remember seeing this book on my mom's bookshelf after she died. And it had to do with thinking. And he just had a way, he was a psychologist, but he had a way of looking at the world and like, for example, he'd say, if somebody said, I wish I could have done that different, or that I would have been here instead there. And he would say, well, you can't ever go back and do that. So why would you even say something like that? You know, like that thought wouldn't even enter his mind to go backwards to do that, because it wasn't even possible. And over the years, he developed and had like spiritual awakenings and was connected to guidance and intuition. He wrote, I don't know, like 30 books. It was a tremendous life of inspiration to read about. He had, I think, 8 or 9 children. So he wrote books on parenting and personal development, personal growth. So
and how did he sort of impact your business?
Right. So how he impacted me, and this always stuck with me, is he said, it's going to be ordinary people that make the biggest changes in our world. And that stuck with me. It wasn't going to be the government. It's not the government that makes huge shifts. It's people. And it can, one person starts a movement and inspires people. And now we see that we have social media and all these platforms, and one person truly can make a huge difference. And that,
absolutely.
And I think we all are here with that potential.
Yeah. And I tell people my one of my favorite quotes is, I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me at the moment, but it's you got to find what go out and find what makes you come alive, right? And go do that, because this world needs more people who have come alive.
Yes.
And especially in today's world, with how connected we are and how big of a voice people can have, it's finding those things that make you come alive, really give you that ability to make a huge difference.
I agree. And there's a lot of people that will, and past generations for sure, they relied on the government. They relied on their doctors. Anybody who had education, who had authority, was seen as the expert. Those were the people they relied on. And it's a sad state of affairs that we're in now. I mean, in almost every area of life, where if you don't look after yourself, really no one is there to do that in a real meaningful way.
Yeah. And it's a reality of life that that self-interest is what is, when we all operate out of our own self-interest and we start putting things together that are, if it's good for your self-interest to eat on this podcast for me, and it's good for my self-interest to have you on this podcast, we end up with mutually beneficial growth. And like, that's the way our economy and our world works is off of, being actually, advocating for ourselves, and realize that the people around us are advocating for themselves, and how we can come together and have, win-win situations in everything that we're doing, whether that's your health, your relationships, or raising your children. Is how do you make it a win across the board for everyone? And I think that's the, that's how we should run the world anyways.
And that's exactly, I like to say it should be a win-win.
Yeah. Cool. So I want to bring it home a little bit. And we talk about guiding principles, and guiding principles are basically the top one or two, maybe principles or actions that you use regularly contribute to your success. Right. And, maybe it's something that you wish you knew at the beginning of your hero's journey. Right. What are some of those things that you could pass on?
Oh, well, more recently, I think at the beginning of the year, I had this insight that I just have to show up and I can't get it wrong, which meant that I had to trust myself. I had to, take this chance of showing up more, getting out, doing things that, it's more comfortable to just stay home, go to work, be at the office. But that's not going to get my message out there to help the people that I know I'm here to help, and to share my gifts and talents with a broader audience. There's only so many people I can see in a day.
Yeah.
But if they don't know I exist, if other people don't know I exist, then
it's really powerful, actually, because one of the things that I've discovered in working with clients all over the country and all over the world now is that the people who succeed the most, who have the biggest impact and make the most money and impact most people's lives, are not the ones who wait or try to do it right. Right? They're the ones who get out there and just do something, right? They, as you put it, they show up, and they show up consistently, and they show up again and again and again and again. And when you show up over and over again, that is more powerful than doing anything once all the way right. Right. So like having the perfect marketing plan, or having the perfect website, or having the perfect podcast guest schedule, or having the perfect whatever it is that you're doing, or your book, like it's the whole concept that done is better than perfect. Right?
I use that phrase. Yes.
Yeah. One of my good friends now in a mastermind that I'm in, she tells me all the time that perfect is the lowest standard you can hold yourself to.
Yeah, I actually write about that in my books, because perfectionism creates stress and overwhelm, and you can end up putting in so much time that you resent what you've put together, and then try and go deliver that.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting is that I've actually seen this happen is that someone for email marketing, for instance, someone who comes out and puts an email out every day to their audience of people, that's terrible, will have a bigger impact and bigger influence than the person who takes a long time and builds the perfect, email automation, or the perfect follow-up sequence, or the perfect story to go with them. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's I don't know, it's just this idea that showing up is more important than showing up right. Right.
Showing up real is more important than showing up as the expert or professional, even though we want to be in our expertise, but we're really in our gifts and talents and being real, not being this facade like I know what's best for you and I've got it all together.
I think we're going to have to coin a phrase. We're going to say showing up real is more important than showing up right. I like that. Because that's really it, right? People who they show up and they just are their authentic selves are, and I said, and I'm using the phrase show up broadly to mean anything from getting your marketing done to writing your book to talking to your clients. Show up, right? Show up and be you, right? And if you have a problem and you don't know who you are, maybe they need to call you and spend some time in one of your group coaching classes.
That is the most fun that I have is helping people discover themselves, get out of their own way so that they can be congruent with their goals, their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions.
And what's interesting is I think that people have an easier time showing up if they know who they are.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right. And a lot of times perfectionism or things like that, where you're having a hard time showing up, is just a mask we're putting on, not knowing who we are.
Well, and it's hard to know who we are when we're protecting ourselves from fear of judgment and expectations and people that say you should do this and you should do that. And like a lot of people get confused and they don't know what to do or who they are or where they're going. And if you don't have clarity, it's a real struggle. And I think people struggle, then they give up, which is really sad.
Yeah. One of my past mentors said you shouldn't let people shoot on you.
Exactly.
Which I thought was funny. So last thing I do on the show every time is we do something that I call the Hero Challenge. And the Hero Challenge is pretty simple. It's basically just, who do you know that you think has a cool story, who would you could introduce to us on the show and bring them on. And who are they and why do you think they would be a good story to share here on the Hero Show?
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to think, search in the archives. Do you know, I'm drawing a blank. Maybe I've got too many things going on. Do you have anyone in your business network or fellow authors, things like that, or friends, people who are running businesses in your network that you think have got a cool story to share? Actually, I think the reason why I wasn't coming up with one is because I have two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, pick one of them. And
so my speaker mentor, without her, I definitely wouldn't be where I am, because I didn't have any training in speaking or a voice, and nothing was really about me as a therapist or in my life, because like everything was about everybody else. So working with her, and she saw the potential in me and could bring it out. So she would be a great one. She works with.
What's her name?
Julia Glide.
Julia Glide, and she teaches people how to sort of get in touch with their voice and become professional speakers.
She does speaker training, training how to do videos.
Oh, okay.
Video training, and she's an amazing business coach.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we'll connect later and see if we can see how to invite her onto the show. That'd be cool. So last thing is basically this. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Phyllis. Really enjoyed having you on. Where can people go if they want to either pick up a copy of one of your books, or if they're interested in learning about your group programs that you teach? If they're feeling stuck now, where can they go to find out about what it is that you offer? And more importantly, who would be the ideal type of person to reach out to you if they are interested in either picking up your books or going through one of your programs?
Yeah. Well, I have to say first, thanks. This has been a fun conversation to have with you, and I like your superheroes, superpowers theme.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah. So my books are available anywhere books are sold. So if you go into a bookstore, if they don't have it, you can ask for it, or you can get it on Amazon. I have two books, Brain Makeover and Tired and Hungry No More.
Yeah, I noticed it's there in the background of your, you just point out a little bit.
Yeah, back there. And then my website would be a great place if you want to connect with me, see more of what I'm about, and look for my events. And the website is phyllisginsberg.com. And
wonderful.
Last to answer is who might be ideal to benefit from what I have to offer would be anyone who feels like they are stressed, anxious, worried, have those fearful survival thoughts going on that are getting in the way of your health, your business, your relationships, finances, parenting, anything where you feel like, I'm not congruent in this. I want this, but I'm having these thoughts. How do I make it happen?
Absolutely. So if you're listening to this and you connect with sort of Phyllis's thinking and you think that maybe you're stuck or you've been in that place, I know I've been there before, where you're thinking in terms of survival instead of what you say possibility thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, instead of possibilities, then I want you to take the time, reach out to Phyllis. I'll spell the website for you here. Would be www.phyllis, Phyllis, Ginsberg, Ginsberg.com. You can find, you say your workshops are there, your books would be available there or on Amazon. And take the time to reach out to her. Obviously, she knows what she's talking about. She's got 30 years of experience, which is, I barely have that much experience with life. So obviously, you know a thing or two about helping people through these things. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with us through some of the stuff. Again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Richard. It's been fun.
Absolutely.